Okay, today we are going to discuss about mechanical activity of the heart. I'm a student. It's a disclaimer. It is made to study for ourselves, and I'm using the PowerPoint which is provided in our college, and it might not be accurate. So read it with your own conscience. Okay, let's start. I'm going to the PPT now. Okay. Mechanical and electrical activity of the heart. Objective. So today we are going to discuss the blood circulation, properties, cardiac cycle, and how it is producing the cardiac output and mechanical activity. So there is also a little activity mentioned here. So it's topic for a different day. So anatomy of the heart. So it has um, right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, and left ventricle. So this is the pulmonary aorta, pulmonary artery. This is aorta, and this is the uh, superior and inferior vena cava through which it enters the right atrium. So if you watch closely here, it is the atrioventricular valve. So it is also atrioventricular valve, but the difference is so here it is present for present between right atrium and right ventricle. Here it is present between left atrium and left ventricle. So here it is the mitral valve. It is a tricuspid valve. So here it is semilunar valve where it enters ulnar artery, and in aortic artery it is also a semilunar valve. So these two, this one and this one is called atrioventricular because it is present between auricle and the ventricle. So this is the brief outline of the heart. So tricuspid and bicuspid capillary muscles. Capillary muscles, we know that these valves are controlled by capillary muscles, which is attached to the heart itself. So you can Google it and see while you are seeing this video how the papillary muscle looks. And the muscles of papillary muscles are attached to cardia tendineae. So it is also a tendon which is attached to the muscles, which in turn attached to the valves, which controls the opening and closing of the valves, capillary muscles. Pulmonary and aortic arteries, similar pulmonary circulation. It is circulation where from the heart it goes to lungs. It is called pulmonary circulation. Systemic circulation is from the heart it goes to all parts of the body except lungs. So in systemic circulation, it goes to kidney, brain, liver, gastrointestinal tract, and all the limbs, upper limb and lower limb. So this is the circulation. If you see here, it is the four chambers of the heart. So the numbers mentioned here are the pressure. So if you see here, we know that 120 it is a systolic pressure of the left ventricle. So whenever we measure uh, our blood pressure, it is we are measuring how much pressure which is exerted by the left ventricle. So from left ventricle it goes to the Systemic circulation. As I said, systemic circulation goes throughout all over the body. So it goes 120. The 80 here it is diastolic pressure. So it goes to systemic circulation all parts of the body. From here, it is a venous return. It is vein. So it comes here and goes to uh, right atrium. So from left ventricle to right atrium. Below we can see the right ventricle. The pressure here is 25. So generally this 25 mmHg is pressure which is inside the right ventricle, which is used. This pressure 25 mmHg is required to push the blood from the heart in the right ventricle going to the lungs. It's pulmonary capillary going to the lungs. The arteries, when you measure the pressure in the arteries, it is 12 near the lungs. In the lungs, 10.5. While return, it is 9. So while finally reaching the um, left atrium, it is 8. So note on this. So it's the same thing that which I explained here. Deoxygenated blood 9, superior inferior vena cava, right atrium. So from right atrium, it through the right atrium through the tricuspid valve. Tricuspid valve is on the right side. Mitral valve or bicuspid valve is on the left side. So through tricuspid valve, it goes to right ventricle. From right ventricle, it goes to pulmonary artery. Pulmonary artery, it goes to um, the lungs, and from the pulmonary vein, it is here. Pulmonary vein, it is coming to the left atrium. So from left atrium to through the mitral valve, mitral valve will be present here. Imagine this is heart. So it reaches the left ventricle and finally through the aorta. So aorta is generally in heart. It comes like this and comes down. So for the sake of understanding, it is simplified here. So this is the aorta. So this left ventricle is coming out of the left ventricle. Left ventricle to aorta. Aorta, it is about 100. Aorta also have pressure. So in aorta, it is about the pressure is about 100. So initially it is 120. So when it goes to aorta, it loses some pressure. The blood goes to the systemic circulation, then capillaries. In systemic circulation, uh, when when the heart goes out of the aorta, it is larger blood vessels. So where it is 90, in the smaller capillaries, that is small blood vessels are called capillaries. It is pressure is 20 mmHg. So this is the general outline. So pressure gradient, the properties of muscles. So we know the properties of the heart muscles. It has gap junctions. So this is the gap junctions. So it is the magnified diagram. So this gap junction, through this gap junction, a calcium ion is placed. So syncytium. So it forms. So since the whole of the muscles are connected by this gap junction, so it has connection. So it is all connected through this gap junction. So all this connection makes it and works at a single unit. So it is called syncytium. So autorhythmicity. So now we are seeing about the properties of the cardiac muscle. So we have skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and cardiac muscle. In cardiac muscle, we are seeing autorhythmicity because it don't require stimulation from brain. It works automatically without any stimulation. The stimulation which we are getting from the brain is mostly help to change the heart rate, not to induce the heart rate. To increase or decrease with the help of the autonomic system, nervous system, brain will control the heart. So conductivity or dromotropy. Conductivity is heart has two types of muscles. We'll discuss later, but heart uh, has a conductivity. Cardiac muscle can conduct impulse from one muscle cell to another. This is due to abundant gap junction at the intercalated discs, where two cardiac muscle cells connect with each other. So, as I said before, the gap junction are are with the intercalated discs. So these discs uh, makes us at a single unit. So when heart contracts, it contracts as a single unit. So that's why uh, the gap junctions are very important. So conductivity is dromo. Dromo means conductivity. You know that excitability. So as I said before, the rate and force of contraction is controlled by our nervous system. So especially our autonomic nervous system. Contractility, inotropy. So here it is conductivity, where the electrical impulses with the help of the calcium ions or sodium ions, it is conducted. Here the conductivity, it is contractility. Contractility is how much it can contract. Here the inotropy is represents the force. I know means force. Remember like that. So the types of cardiac muscles. So as I said before, if you see here, there are yellow color lines and points we can see here. SA nodes. These are also muscles actually. SA node. This is SA node, AV node. These are also muscles, but it is a specialized muscle, cardiac muscle. So rest of the uh, pinkish color muscle is non-specialized. It is like our skeletal muscle, except it has gap junction. So it helps in contraction, but the specialized muscle cells, so helps. It's like a wire. It helps in the conduction. So AV node is a pacemaker. We all know that. It's capable of generating its own action potential. Whenever muscle contracts or any activation occurs, action potential comes. So SA node, this node is called SA node. It produces action potential. So heart contracts. So we'll talk about action potential. Imagine here we are talking about the flow of ions inside and outside of the heart. So when the calcium, generally the rule is, um, if you take a muscle cell, here we are taking a cardiac muscle. So the cardiac muscle we are taking is, we know there are two cardiac muscles. One it is specialized and another one is non-specialized. One of the specialized cardiac muscle is SA node. So here you take one SA node, and if you take that SA node, it Watson, Watson, Srivatsan, Ade Srivatsan. Amrut, Amrute, Amrut. ரெக்கார்ட் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கேன். அப்ப சப்மிட் ஆயிடுச்சு. So here we see generally if you take a heart muscle or any cell in our body, it is in a um, polarized state. Polarized means whether it is negative or positive. Here it is negatively polarized. So it is negatively polarized means it is not in zero. If you see, it is in minus 60. So it is in a pole, negative pole. So it is in the pole. From the pole, it is going to zero. So it is from the, if you are going to the pole, it is called polarization. If you're going away from the pole, if you're going towards the zero, it is called depolarization. So here we see it, first step is zero, step zero, it is depolarizing. So the heart is becoming positive. So if more positive calcium ion is added inside the heart muscle, so it is going from the negative to positive. So suddenly, uh, during this phase, generally it produces contraction. After the producing contraction, again it is going from the depolarized state to again normal polarized state. Okay, here the calcium ion comes in, here the here the potassium ion goes out. See, it's the same thing, depolarization. The calcium influx of Na and Ca. Sometimes sodium comes and calcium comes. So when calcium comes and sodium comes, it is both positive. So it is negativity is going slowly towards zero, and it comes down. So in phase 3, from Na and calcium, it is going down. In phase 3, so here, in order to come, sodium and calcium ion should enter. So while entering, it is going up. So all the sodium and calcium ion is coming here, and it is going up. At this point, the calcium and sodium channel are closed. So no more calcium and sodium can enter. But inside the cell of the muscle, we have potassium. So it is like sodium and calcium are guest. So potassium is already is in the home. So since there is no more, there are a lot of positive people are inside. Some of them positive has to go out to make it negative again. So to make it towards the negative pole. So now in phase zero, it is depolarized. In phase three, it is repolarizing. It is zero. It is a negative pole. So it is coming from non-pole to a pole. So here it is a depolarizing. It is again repolarizing. Again polarized. So in phase 4. So here we can see the graph is little bit different compared to the SA node. Here the graph is, each muscle have different action potential. Here the graph is for SA node. This is the graph is for ventricle. So it's a ventricular muscle. So here also sharp depolarization occurs, and slowly uh, it is in the plateau. Again it comes down. Again it is repolarization. Here we know that potassium goes out and repolarization repolarization occurs. You might ask, what happened to the potassium going out? It will come back later slowly. So we are seeing about the um, depolarization. So if you see the depolarization, the calcium ion tips in depolarization. Here we are talking about non-specialized cells. What are the non-specialized cells? The muscles of the atrium and ventricles are non-specialized. The one which is in the pink colors, except the all these muscles are normal muscles. The graph of this yellow muscles are this one, and the pink muscles are this one. So in phase zero, in phase zero, sodium comes in, and the action potential is generated. In phase one, start of repolarization, again it is repolarized. Slowly the potassium is going out. Here the potassium is going out, and at the same time calcium is coming. So it is balancing here. But here at the point here, calcium channel will close. So only potassium will start going. So here positive calcium is coming, positive potassium is going. So it is maintaining. Here the calcium is stop coming in, but the potassium starts going out. So it is again goes to repolarization. So phase two, it is a plateau phase. So it's the same thing what I've explained. If you just want to read out your slides, it's the same. Initially calcium comes in. So as after calcium comes in, uh, the microfilaments will start to contract, and the calcium also goes to um, the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So where more calcium is released, so the calcium triggers release of more calcium here. Again, more calcium comes out. Calcium when increases, we know depolarization will occur. So after completion of all this work, with the help of calcium, potassium, calcium, sodium pump, and sodium potassium pump, all the balance is replaced again. That is the mechanism here. So it is here. If you see the blue line, it is how the calcium is coming in. When calcium is coming in, also the contraction occurs. So calcium coming in is equal to contraction. But there is always a delay between the signal coming in and the action is produced. That's why the graph is little bit coming here. But these two events are correlated. Because of calcium coming in, contraction of muscle occurs. So we are going to see it in the step by step. First one is depolarization current. So the ions are coming in and it triggers. So here, if you see, sometimes it might be sodium, sometimes it might be calcium. So calcium comes in and also stimulates more sarcoplasmic reticulum. More calcium is released, and it binds to the muscle fibers, the actin and myosin filament. So the actin filaments is binds to the actin filament and opening up the um, cross bridge cycle begins. So step by step. So first one is the current spreads. So the current, it might be sodium or calcium. The current action potential travels along plasma membrane and T tubules. It's along the plasma membrane and T tubule. Calcium channel open in the plasma membrane and sarcoplasmic reticulum. So this is sarcoplasmic reticulum. So here it's also calcium channel is open. Here is also calcium channel is open. That's what mentioned here. SR means sarcoplasmic reticulum. The calcium induced calcium release from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. The calcium binds to the troponin and exposing myosin binds sites. As I said, the calcium is uh, attached to the troponin. So, moment it troponin attach, all the sites for the attachment of myosin filaments will open up and cross-bridging cycle begins. So calcium is actively transported back into the SR and the ECF, extracellular fluid. So after completion, what happens? Calcium use of calcium is over, and it again goes back to the place where it started here, sarcoplasmic reticulum, and again the calcium goes out with the help of calcium pump and sodium calcium pump into the extracellular fluid. So the same mechanism. uh, DB dependent calcium pump and sodium uh, calcium exchanger and potassium sodium ATPase pump. Digitalis is a drug where it causes with which prevents calcium from getting out by preventing sodium potassium ATPase. So it prevents the escape of ions, so it increases the inotropy. So the more calcium or more ions present inside the muscle, positive ions, it produces more forceful contraction. As I said before, increased inotropy means increased force. Inotropy means force. Length tension relationship. It is very difficult for it to conceive as length. Here, compare it as a small, um, let me say, put it like this. Okay. Um, you take it as a small, it is a whole length of the muscle because heart is round, right? So think it is as a ventricle. So when the length of the ventricle is increased, it is like balloon is stretched, balloon has more force. When the balloon shrinks, it has less force. It is depend upon how the balloon is stretched. If the balloon is not stretched, it has less tension. See, blow a balloon. If the balloon has less air, it is we can easily compress the balloon. If the balloon has more air, it is difficult to compress because it has more tension built in the muscle. Okay. So here, when we come, when the load is increased, load is nothing but blood. Here, instead of balloon, we have heart. Instead of air, we have blood. So more blood is coming in, so more stretch happens inside the heart. So it more stretch means more tension is created in the balloon. So active tension. So heart is not like a balloon. Heart doesn't A balloon doesn't have any uh, uh, cross bridging or any contractile unit, unlike a balloon. So the cross bridging present inside the heart muscle will also contract. So when the contract, the force of contraction is also increased. So this is very important when we deal with the medications. So when we want a muscle when we want to increase the force of contraction, we have to increase the inotropic effect. So there we'll use this Frank Sterling curve. So the Frank Sterling curve is based on the length tension relationship. As I said, don't see it as a linearly like in the scale. In the heart, it is see it as a ring. So compare a ring with a ventricle. Ventricle, imagining a ring, gives you a 2D dimension of what happening inside the ventricle or the chambers of the heart. So here, if you note the end diastolic volume, amount of blood in the ventricle at the end diastolic volume or ventricular filling. So when uh, heart, it needs to pump the blood from the left ventricle to the systemic circulation. During this, blood has to fill the ventricle. So after filling of the ventricles, ventricle has to fill. We have two phases in the heart: systolic and diastolic. Systolic is contraction, diastolic is relaxation during the diastole of the ventricles. So diastole happens and systole also happens. Systole and diastole can happen in both atrium and also in ventricle. I am talking about the ventricle now. Generally, when you talk about diastolic volume, mostly we'll talk about the diastolic volume of the ventricle. During diastole, heart relaxes. So when blood comes in, heart relaxes. So only when heart relaxes, more blood can come inside the heart. So more blood can be filled. So end diastolic volume. So at the end of the diastole, what is the volume of the blood? Volume is nothing but the amount of blood. So the more blood in the uh, heart chamber, it stretches the heart. Compare us, see it with a balloon. More air, more stretch. So here, more blood, more stretching, more preload. Preload is nothing but uh, now the blood is filling the ventricle. So before heart pump out the blood, before the heart pump out the blood, what is the load? What is the tension? What is the pressure in the ventricle? That is the preload. So active tension is created. So more preload is created. Active tension also created. How the active tension is created? Because heart is a living tissue. It's a living thing. So like compare a balloon we are pressing with the hands. Here the heart is pressing itself with the ventricles. So active tension is created and more contraction, more forceful contraction. So the more you contract, more volume of blood goes out. If you contract very lightly, less volume of blood will go out. So here active tension is created by contraction of the heart, more contraction, more stroke volume. Here the stroke volume is amount of blood sent out from the heart to our body circulation. It is called stroke volume. Atrial pressure gradient. So atrial pressure increases pressure gradient between the right atrium and right ventricle. So we are talking about right side of the heart. So increased velocity. So more pressure in the right atrium will increase the blood flow to the left ventricles. So the more pressure, atrium produce contracts. It goes to the ventricles. Ventricular filling happens in the ventricle. End diastolic volume is increasing. So as we said before, more volume, more stretch, more preload, more active tension created by the heart itself, and more contraction, stroke volume. Same thing. So here the ventricular filling, diastolic pressure determines the ventricle and actual volume of the ventricle. This occurs during diastole and relaxation. So if you study this slowly, you will understand what I said. It is same as what I said now. Diastolic pressure. Diastolic pressure determines the pressure in the ventricles and actual volume of blood in the ventricles. This occurs during diastolic relaxation. After diastole, myocardial fibers lengthen and active tension is created. So what happens in the diastole? Diastole is nothing but relaxation. During relaxation, blood is filling and there is a diastasis here. We'll look out what is diastasis in the live. Hey, look up diastasis. Diastasis is nothing but stretching. So stretching happens. So atrial systole. So in atrial systole, isovolumetric contraction. So as we know, when we fill the blood inside the heart, we have to pump the blood out. So when we compress uh, a loosely closed water bottle, initially there won't be an escaping of water out, but the the pressure is created while you compressing, but there is no change in the shape of the bottle. But once the cap opens, suddenly there is a contraction. The water inside the water bottle will go out. Like the same, iso means same, volume is same. So here the volume is same. The blood came inside is same, but the contraction is produced. The volume of the blood is not changing. So it is isovolumetric contraction. After isovolumetric contraction, there is a pressure buildup. After the pressure buildup, there is an ejection of blood. So here the definition: the stroke volume, cardiac output, venous return, the quantity of the blood flowing from the veins into the atrium each minute. It's venous return. Cardiac output is stroke volume is amount of blood in each stroke. Once a heart contract, it ejects 40 ml of blood. So each contraction 40 ml is going out. If you take in our body, our heart rate is 72. So heart rate HR is 72 here and stroke volume is 40. So 40 into 72 gives the cardiac output. So stroke volume is how much volume comes out per contraction. Cardiac output is amount of blood comes out after 1 minute. In 1 minute, 72 beats. So after 72 beats, how much volume of blood came out? So these are the Vickers diagram. Vickers diagram here it mentions it's coinciding the ECG wave, comparing it with the pressure built up in the aorta and also in heart in general. So here the isovolumetric contraction occurs. As I said, when isovolumetric contraction happens, pressure is building. So the pressure is building here. So volume is not changing, but the pressure is building. During ejection, what happens? Slowly the pressure is stopped. After pressure drops, hearts also start to relax. And when heart start to relax, again pressure goes down. So after opening up the atrioventricular valve opens automatically. At the end of the isometric relaxation, we have a AV opening. After AV valve opens, rapid filling happens. So during rapid filling, also there is no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. But after that, we'll start with the isovolumetric contraction. So compare it with the ECG also. Here, the the contraction is coincides with the QRS complex, and the relaxation coincides with the ejection of blood, T wave, and the end of the diastole. So you can imagine what is in the atrial depolarization is P wave and increase in the atrial pressure. Additional 20% of blood increases the ventricular volume. So the explanation here is not that much detailed because the cardiac cycle in itself is a huge topic to be learned. So QRS complex is depolarization of the ventricles. So whenever depolarization occurs, there is a contraction. So here depolarization of ventricles will happen. The ventricle blood volume. What about atrial contraction plus ventricular depolarization? At this point, the ventricular pressure is greater than exceeds the atrial pressure. It results in the AV closure. Okay, after all the blood comes to the ventricle, atrioventricular valve has to close. So the valve which is separating atrium and ventricles has to close, so that when the heart creates build up pressure to eject the blood out during the process, the blood should not come back. Isovolumetric isovolumetric contraction, systole, active force in the ventricles. It is, we all know, 120 mmHg. Ejection. So how the ejection will take place? Ventricular pressure is more because when blood comes out of ventricle, it is very powerful. In aortic pressure, it is decreased. So it is little bit decreased compared to the ventricular pressure. And aortic valve opens. Middle of the ejection phase is maximum systolic pressure. So there is a maximum pressure exerted by the heart. Ventricular relaxation suddenly begins at the end of this. Uh, s- uh, so after systole, after contraction, relaxation should occur, allowing both arms to relax. The period of diastole is longer because it has to take long time to fill the blood, but we have to put more force and more velocity, so it pumps the blood fast forcefully out. This also is based on the Frank Sterling law. So isovolumetric relaxation. So just read and coincide with what it is. So there is a necrotic notch or insura. So this is has to be noted carefully. It can be asked in exam. Insura, when there is a ventricular pressure is less than the aortic pressure. Okay. So in the ventricles, the pressure will drop. After sending the blood, there won't be blood. Only when there is blood inside the ventricle, there will be pressure. So after blood goes out, ventricular pressure will fall down, and there will be an increased aortic pressure. So this phenomenon is called necrotic notch or insura. As a result, there is a pooling of blood in the aorta, leading to abrupt increase in the aortic pressure before the blood moves towards the aortic system. So atrioventricular valves open, the ventricular pressure uh, decreases compared to the aortic uh, pressure. To ensure ventricular filling, Franz Stadler increased stretching, increased force of contraction. So, so uh, when we stretch more, more blood is coming inside, which causing the stretch, and more force is used to push out. Frank Sterling law again. Ventricular filling, rapid inflow. So moderately increased pressure that have developed in the atria during ventricular system immediately pushes the AV valve open and allow the blood to flow rapidly into the ventricles. So cardiac pulse and what happens during each pulse. So A wave is atrial systole and C wave is isovolumetric contraction. So wherever contraction takes place, there is an increase in the pressure. So atrial contraction, C is bulging of T wave, and RA against closed tricuspid valve. So try to skip it. EKG, spread of depolarization to the aorta, atria. So in atrium, if the depolarization, the systole happens, P wave. QRS, depolarization of ventricles. T wave is repolarization of ventricles. You can ask where is the repolarization of atria. The repolarization of atria also occurs inside the T wave because the repolarization of atria is uh, same time as T wave, but it has less electrical activity compared to the ventricle. So it is not shown in the ECG wave. Assessment of myocardial performance, rate of pressure development, velocity of ejection, ventricular pump. So pressure development, velocity of the ejection, ventricular pressure, volume loop, inotropic rate, preload, afterload. So it explains the same. Inotropy is contractility force. Preload is initial sarcomere length before the ejection. Afterload is force that um, contracting myocyte must overcome. So how much force it is felt by the heart uh, during the ejection, just during the ejection. Preload is before the filling of blood. Here, after the filling of blood, ready for the ejection. Inotropy force of contraction, preload, onset of contraction correspond to the entire study running. The tension developed in the ventricular valve during ejection determine the aortic pressure and the atrial resistance. Slow Ohm's law, mean atrial pressure. Mean atrial pressure is complete cardiac cycle. Uh, Average blood pressure in a complete cardiac cycle. So diastolic pressure, systolic pressure, and pulse pressure. If you just um, add everything, you'll get this. So PP here, it is uh, present here. So pulse pressure is found out by systolic pressure and also diastolic pressure minus diastolic pressure, that is pulse pressure. Pulse pressure is placed here by 3, and also um the P pressure of okay, we'll see this later. Where cardiac output, TPR is the total peripheral resistance. So peripheral resistance is means how much resistance a blood flow will experience when the blood is going to different organs. So when blood goes to different organs, So it has to go through the blood vessels. It needs some force, but when it goes with the force, there is also experience of resistance. So so MCFP is mainly vein. But if you take in the heart, the arteries, there is a circulatory pressure, but in veins there is not much pressure. So mean circulatory filling pressure is mostly the pressure which is experienced by the veins when it comes back to the heart. So there is actually there is a pressure which is pushing your heart, pushing your blood towards the heart. So the which the pressure is experienced in the vein. So mostly the pressure is produced by different uh, organs which is surrounding the veins, which pushes the blood towards the heart. So that's how venous return takes place. So affecting the preload, increased blood volume. So if you take only this section, increased venous return means more blood is coming inside. Right atrial pressure increases because all blood goes to the right atrium. End diastolic volume also increases. So preload is also increases. But um, increased VC. VC is ventricular contractions. Decreased ventricular contraction is decreased right atrial pressure, decreased end diastolic volume, decreased preload. I think it's VC is uh, venous capacitance. So venous capacitance is so the pressure of the veins. So veins, there is increased venous capacitance. So veins can handle more pressure. So if veins handle more pressure, more blood is in the vein. So venous return is decreased. So decrease in the atrial pressure and decrease in the end diastolic volume and decrease in the preload. Increased mean circulatory filling pressure. As I said, mean circulatory filling pressure is how much blood pressure experienced by the vein when it comes back to the heart. If it increase, automatically atrial pressure increase, end diastolic volume increase, and preload is increased. Most of the steps we need to imagine and correlate to understand this whole chain of events happening here. Here, if you see VR, venous return is calculated by mean MSF. I think, okay, I'm not sure about it. Please research yourself. Laplace's law. So I didn't complete here, or it's already went. So Laplace is not nothing but T is equal to PR by W. So the tension of the uh, wall of the blood vessels, how much tension it experiences is distending pressure into radius P into R by W. That is Laplace's law. So distending pressure into radius by wall thickness. This is Laplace's law, which is very much important to study the ventricular hypertrophy and all those stuffs is very very important. So that based on that uh, will help the clinicians to prescribe the dosage of medicines, how much they need to give. Intrinsic ability of the cardiac muscle is to develop force at the given muscle length. Card- Contractile state of the cardiac muscle related to intracellular contraction. Intracellular calcium availability, factors affect ionotropy. As I said before, the force. If more calcium is available, more force. More muscle mass is available, more force. Here it is the volume, stroke volume, and here it is diastolic pressure of the left ventricle. So both are increased when the contractility increased. When both are decreased, when the contractility is decreased. Sorry, that diastolic volume is remaining little bit the same. Here, if you see the left ventricle, if there is contractility is decreased, the stroke volume is decreased, but the diastolic pressure is um, yeah, it's also decreased. But comparatively, this one is decreasing more. The stroke volume is decreasing more. The stroke volume increases, also diastolic pressure increases. Diastolic pressure increases, stroke volume increases. Remember it for effective Frank Selenko. So sodium potassium ATPase inhibits. So more sodium is inside. So more sodium, more calcium is also inactive. Inactive. So increased intracellular calcium. So contraction is increased. So digitalis is a medicine given for heart failure. Muscle mass, decreased number of myocardial fibers, decreased number of transmitting diffuse inotropic state. Velocity of the ejection, decrease the short velocity. Less speed means less volume is putting out. So isometric maximal isometric force that can be generated in left ventricle. The decreased preload with after load causes a decrease in velocity of shot. The velocity of shortening ejection maximal isometric force Vmax. If you see here, increased preload, increased velocity of shortening. So increased velocity of shortening nothing means contraction. Increased, so faster ejection, increased isometric force, Vmax no change. What is Vmax? So velocity of shortening is decreased, ejection is slower, isometric force is lower, and Vmax is also lower. Increased inotropy. So more force is produced. If there is more force, increase velocity, ejection is also faster, maximal isometric force, and increase Vmax. Like this. Search Vmax. Yes, Vmax. Vmax. Map maximum upstroke velocity. Maximum upstroke velocity. A simple device for measuring maximum upstroke velocity. Cardiac action potential is described. So aortic velocity. Okay. velocity at starting after giving the afterload F max without changing V max. F max. Force velocity relationship. F max is maximal isometric force. So if you see, there is maximum velocity here. There is a force generated during shortening is also maximal. When the force generated is less, there is uh, more velocity. So velocity of shortening at the given afterload. So if you take um, afterload, the velocity of the shortening is gradually decreasing in the low preload. It is more during the high preload. So during the increased preload, the velocity at a given afterload is high. F max without changing V max. So V max is the same here, but the um, force is increased. It is based on the preload. If there is more preload without changing the velocity, there is more force. So it is the point to be noted. There is no change in the velocity. Velocity is how fast the heart muscle is contracting. Here, how much force. So velocity is also important. So here the velocity is also changing, and also force is also changing. So if you have more velocity, more force. If you have more velocity, more force. Less velocity, less force. It's also related. It happens during increased inotropy. So here we are increasing more blood. So more blood to increase more force of contraction. If you increase force of contraction, inotropy increases the velocity of shortening at a given afterload, F and V max. So during high inotropy, more forceful contraction, both increases. Pressure volume loop. So AB is decrease in the ventricular pressure. Decrease in the ventricular pressure. VC is remainder of diastole increase in the ventricular pressure reflects the ventricular filling. So B2C, the pressure is gradually increasing, so ventricle is filling. A small increase in the pressure before the mitral valve closes due to the contribution of atrial contraction to the ventricular filling. So here we are talking about ventricles. So more blood is coming inside. So during the blood coming in inside the ventricles, auricles is also contracting. So more blood is coming inside. Now here it is passively coming. Here it is actively coming due to contraction. So it is like opening up the tap. So here the AV atrioventricular valve is open, blood is coming inside. But here more balloon is pushed. So it is C from C to D. So C to D isovolumetric contraction. As I see, the heart is contracting but not letting the blood out. It is building up the pressure. The volume is same, but pressure is increasing. Isovolumetric contraction. D to E, D to E, a rapid phase of ejection. D to E is when the ejection takes place. Again, the pressure is increasing because it is contracting, contracting, contracting slowly. it reaches E. From E to F, rapid phase of ejection. This is D to E. E phase is reduction in the volume followed by reduced ejection. So there is reduced ejection, E to F, volume of the. Again, it goes to relaxation, isovolumetric relaxation. Isovolumetric relaxation characterizes sharp drop in the pressure. So A to B, B to C, and A to B, B A to B, and near the C, and C to D, D to E, and F and A. Very simple. Alter states of pressure volume group. End diastolic pressure represents reciprocal ventricular compressed, increased ventricular pressure but same volume. So ventricular pressure is increased but the volume is same. End diastolic pressure and volume. So pressure volume group. So we learned during preload what happens if there is preload is increased. So uh, the filling, more filling takes place, and also there is increase in isovolumetric contraction, and also ejection phase is also increased because more filling happens, more has to be ejected. Here more after load. Okay, after load pressure is increased. So here after the blood is filled, for some reason after the blood is filled more pressure is created. So if preload increases, there is an increase in blood volume. If the afterload increases, there is more increase in the pressure. So increase aortic pressure, red loop at constant period, SV decreases, stroke volume decreases, and the ESV increases. And systolic volume increases. So if there is afterload, there is increased afterload at constant preload, stroke volume decreases. See the stroke volume, it is the measure of stroke volume. You know the stroke volume is decreased. See there is a decrease in the stroke volume. Here there is increased contractility. So stroke volume is also a little bit decreased. Yeah, decreased I say. Let's learn from this. At constant preload and aortic diastolic pressure, the stroke volume increases, and ESV decreases. End systolic volume is decreases. Here the stroke volume decreases. Here stroke volume increases. Here end systolic volume increases. Here end systolic volume is decreases. Because after systole the volume has to be, if there is more increase in systolic volume, stroke volume, more stroke volume is there, so there is very less blood in the heart after the end of the systolic volume. So here the explanation is like more stroke volume is amount of blood getting out. More blood goes out, less blood stays in the heart. End systolic volume. So EF increases, ejection fraction increases. Yes, more blood is going out means ejection is increased, right? See the ejection. Factors affecting cardiac output and TPR. Uh, TPR, think it is TPR. Just research it by yourself. Total peripheral resistance, TPR, total peripheral resistance. So, factors affecting cardiac output and total peripheral resistance. So, preload contractility and afterload heart rate all affects the mean arterial pressure. So, the cardiac output is affected by stroke volume and heart rate. Stroke volume itself is affected by preload contractility and afterload. Factors increasing cardiac output: inotropy, force of contraction, preload, venous return, sympathetic activation. Factors increasing total peripheral resistance: increased viscosity, sympathetic activation, and vasoconstriction. Heart sounds: closure of AV, semilunar valve, recoil of ventricular valves during rapid filling and atrial contraction. Venous stenosis: narrowing of the orifice of the valve with the restriction of blood flow. Valvular regurgitation: incomplete closure of valve with a black flow of blood. Electrical activity of the heart. We'll see it on the next time. Bye bye.